Okay, I'm ready to continue with the refresh and upgrade of this AMC 20 rear axle for my Jeep. And one of the things I didn't cover very well on the last video, part 1. This is part 2. Part 1, I'll put a card up in the top right hand corner so you can get to part 1 if you've not seen part 1. But at the end of part 1, I did take off the seals. These axle tubes have a seal on them, and they're on the outer area. About 1.5 inches from the inside here. About 1.5 inches in is the seal, which creates basically what I think they call a wet axle. But the seal's here. Because I had my chunk or differential physically out of here, what made it easy for me is I stuck the largest socket that I had down in this tube, and then ran a broom handle from the other end, and whenever I just tapped it, it tapped right out. So that was relatively easy. If your differential's still in there, obviously you have to get it from the end, and that may be more difficult. But that's how I got mine out. The next thing I got to do is get the bearing races out of this. There's 2 bearing races here that basically support the pinion shaft. Here you can see one of them right here. We're going to get this out. This one's got to come out this direction, and the other one back here's got to go out that direction. Sometimes on those types of this removal, there's a little notch that really helps you get a chisel piece in there, whatever. In my case, I'll flash up a little picture. I just was looking at it, and there's not. There's just a very small ledge there I got to get onto to get that. So we're gonna get those out next. The other thing I just want to brief real quickly here is I am going to also strengthen this a little bit. There's several ways you can do that. Probably one of the best ways is actually put what they call a truss. And it bridges, you would weld it to both tubes. It bridges across the whole thing. It gets welded to both tubes and welded to the center pumpkin area, and that really helps keeping this piece from being able to spin around this guy. That's one way to do it. Another way, people are actually welding these seams here. I've seen so many videos when you're trying to weld steel to cast steel or cast iron, whatever this is, some kind of a cast piece. It really actually ends up weakening this piece, and if you're trying to really, that weld would really be trying to absolutely stop the torsion or the twisting of this guy inside that. And what I'm going to try and do instead is I saw where a guy actually, he cleaned up this area here. What you can see right there is this axle tube, and if I could just put weld on this piece here, I can actually create a plug so that these two don't want to twist. By the factory, there's plug welds here. There's 2 on either side here, and there's also one in the center back here. So it's already plug welded 3 times, but I think if I put that 4th one in there, that'll give me the kind of the strength that I need. Again, I'm not building a rock crawler or anything like that. Obviously, when you go to that, you're probably going to want to go to a truss system. That's just not what my needs are. So we're going to get this cleaned up, try and get this welded, and but we're going to start by getting those bearing races out. All right, so both of the races came out fairly easy, and both of them are absolutely polished, clean. There's not a scratch mark on it. They look in really good condition, but it's my understanding that you always replace bearings and races in pairs. Whenever you buy a bearing, it comes with a race anyway, might as well replace it. So got this out. And then the other thing is, what I had kind of forgotten, is behind it is, this actually sat in there like that. And behind it they have this spacer. And they use spacers behind these races to basically adjust the pinion depth. And that basically changes how it engages with the ring gear. So the pinion and the ring gear, that's got to be able to be matched and married together. And so they got this spacer. Now, obviously you can see that when I was beating on this with that punch, I was basically beating on the back side of this. This spacing probably will not work with what I'm going to go with anyway. And these are replaceable just like the bearing thing. So this one did get chewed up. The key to what we just did is, I don't care if I beat this up, I don't care if I beat this up. What I don't want to do is beat up the channel that this right here slides into, and I was very careful not to do that. And so, the housing was not touched by the chisel, just these pieces. So anyway, now we got that done. I think now I'm going to take this, I want to I think I'm going to pressure wash the whole thing, get a lot of this greasy grime type stuff off. And then I might actually then whip out I've got a pot blaster. I might actually sandblast it and get it all kind of cleaned up, maybe, and get some primer on it and paint, and then basically kind of start the build back process. So let me get set up for that. All right, let me catch you up to speed. So I dragged this thing outside and I pressure washed it with some degreaser, and to be honest with you, that didn't really do much. It took off a little bit of the grime, but really the caked on stuff was still there, and that was okay. I was just trying to get some of the stuff off. And then I've got this pot blaster and some black diamond, and I knew I was gonna sandblast this thing. And let me a disclaimer right up front: if you are going to sandblast this thing, sand or particles are gonna get inside. You've got to be committed to flushing it out afterwards. So what I've done is I've sandblasted. It took about an hour. I've sandblasted the entire thing. I'm about to blow it. You can see some of the dust still on there. I'm going to blow this off with compressed air, and then I'm going to actually put on my primer on this outside surface. So I'm about to blow this off and prime it. Once the primer is, and I'll probably prime this side and let it dry for 30 minutes, whatever, then flip it over and prime the other side. It's going to be in 2 sessions probably. Once it's got good primer on, I'll probably even wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to get my pressure washer back out and a bunch of soapy suds and Dawn dishwater, and I'm going to rinse it out. I'm going to stand it on its end. I'm going to rinse it out some more. I'm going to spend 30 minutes blasting the inside of this with water and soap. And because I'm going to put water back on is why I want to put the layer of primer on it, just to get it so this part won't rust. But this is, you can see, a real super shiny. That's the it's down to bare metal, and it's really ready to be primed. So let me blow it off and let's get some primer on it. All right, got it all blown off, about ready to do the primer. And because it's this thing does get kind of warm, especially up in the pinion area, I'm using this VHT engine enamel primer. It's good to 550 degrees Fahrenheit, so I figured this would be the better primer than any type of like epoxy primer or something like that. So we're going to get it painted. Well, it appears it's going to be a couple days before the internals get in, so I'm going to go ahead and spray paint the outside of this as well. Again, a VHT enamel, engine enamel, up to 550 degrees. This will be pretty good for this. So let's get a couple coats on here. All right, I got 3 coats of satin black on it. I think it looks really good. Next, we're gonna basically take the cover back off the back side and spend a lot of time pressure washing the inside. I gotta get all that grit out of the inside. So let's work on that next. So I was outside and I was feeling really good because I got that last coat of black paint on this thing, and I look up at the camera and 5 of you are screaming at the screen saying, "Mike, you forgot to weld the tubes." And I look here and you're right. I really meant to do this. I got kind of carried away when I did the primer. When I did the primer, I actually realized it. I thought, oh, I'll be able to straighten the primer off. Then a couple things happened, and it just thought it was the right thing to do, go ahead and paint it black, and at that point I did completely forget. So I've got to now kind of grind, and I've been back and forth about 3 times. I'm going to leave it like this, I'm going to weld it, I'm going to leave it. I think I'm going to weld it. So I'm going to see what it takes to scrape some of this off and clean this out. Alright, let me explain one more time what we're trying to accomplish with welding the tubes, and that is that these tubes are actually trying to stay, they're not trying to, they're not going to want to rotate because of the leaf spring is right here. They're going to hold this thing from trying to rotate, but yet the way the pinion works, when it rotates one direction, in order for the wheels to go forward, this thing wants to go backwards, which means the front of it wants to lift up. So the tube's staying still, but this thing's wanting to rotate this direction. So my real goal when I weld this tube is I'm going to obviously clean this stuff out, and then I want to make sure the weld, I'm not really trying to weld the tube to the axle at this point. I'm just trying to get a good weld on the tube down inside this hole to create a plug, almost like a Woodruff key, so that when this tries to spin against this, it'll hit that stop. And I'm really worried more about on this top side, not so much the bottom. But I'm going to do the whole thing, but I'm really just trying to create a plug, not trying to actually fuse these two metals together. We're going to grind, we're going to sand it down, we're going to heat it up, we'll weld it, we'll let it cool down slowly. So before I do that though, I'm going to explain that when I got this thing back in here and got to it back the next day, I was reaching in here and there was a little bit of grit still inside this pumpkin, and that was disappointing. So I ended up using a whole can of brake cleaner and about a whole roll of Scott towels, and just sprayed this thing out sitting like this, and actually also turned it upside down and sprayed it the other side, both directions. So I think I got it cleaned up as well as it's going to clean up. I'm now going to put this cover back on in preparation to getting this stuff sanded off. Check this out. So that actually didn't turn out to be as much of a pain in the butt as I really kind of thought it was. It didn't sand too difficult. The welding was not too difficult. I decided not to try and grind this down and make it flawless where you couldn't see it. I actually wanted you to see it just like the manufacturer's welds. You can see where they are. I did want to see kind of where this was, just to kind of prove that it was done. But anyway, that cleaned up really well. We're kind of done here. I think I'm going to try and fit this on my workbench. If not, we're going to do the next part of the work here in this area. But I also just finished editing all the video to this point, and holy cow, how boring that is. So I'm going to end this with one more little shot with a little sneak preview and a teaser of what's coming up next. So here's a look at the original equipment that came out of this rear end. It had an open differential. There's no limited slip capabilities of this at all, completely open, as well as the gearing. This had the 354 gears. And once I realized that these bearing races were messed up and I was going to swap out the bearings, it just meant that I was going to definitely have to reset up these gears completely. And instead of doing that, that made up my decision to change the plans from what I originally was thinking about doing. And instead of doing this, I'm actually going to scrap all of this and go with a limited slip differential. And I'm going to upgrade the gears from 354s to 373. So what I bought was, for my application, this is for the AMC 20. This is the Eaton True Track. It's got some neat capabilities. I'll go in more detail in the next video as we're setting this up. Maybe some exploded views of how this works. It does not have clutch plates in it and use like friction to do that. It's a totally different type of technology. I just think it's kind of cool. I bought it based on that. And this is the most expensive option. This was around a little over $700. But I got that. I got the bearing, the race kit, bushing kit, as well as here is my motive gear, 373 gears that I'll be going on that. So that's going to be the next episode, is get all this stuff installed and properly set up in that axle housing. So hope if you like this type of content, hope you decide to follow along. Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. That way you'll know when the next video comes out. But we'll be jumping on this pretty soon. And as always, I hope to see you next time.
Jack it up.